January 26th, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's 1 o'clock. It's a superintendent's workshop, and so named. I would like to turn it to our illustrious superintendent, David Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is an honor to be here in a regular jacket, not the gold-coated jacket I had on last evening, and looking forward to a very productive workshop today. The first item on the workshop is a very exciting item, an item that the board has provided a great deal of leadership around. Ms. Berenborg initially provided some incentives and some fueling, like everyone sits in a different place now, to follow up and look into the possibility of creating a relationship to maximize an opportunity regarding the property across the street from Vero Beach Senior High School. Mr. Barefoot has also provided a great deal of support as we have moved through this process. So we're excited to bring this to the board this evening for approval. And this is the opportunity for us as a school system to receive ownership through a donation through the Graves family, in which they would provide us that land across from Vero Beach High School. It is an opportunity for us to leverage the foundation that we are creating to work with the Graves family, creating a priority to bring a facility, track and field to life, and provide that as an opportunity for our community to have access to it. So this is an opportunity to be innovative, increasing access, which ultimately has a positive input on equity across our community. In addition to the donation of the land, we've also, through the leadership of Mr. Fagan on our side and Mr. Jason Brown, our county administrator, working with the county to ensure that any deed restriction on the property would not interfere with our ability to create these innovative spaces for our children in our community. And we have successfully navigated those waters as well. I'd like Mr. Fagan to provide just a little bit more clarity around that work and that partnership that has taken place.
Thank you, Soup. Through the chair, and to all, good afternoon. It's with great pleasure and honor that we bring this item to the board today and tonight, all under the leadership of Dr. Moore as well as the board members. Several thanks are indeed due today. One to Mr. Graves for the donation. Katie, into the table, providing legal support from Suzanne's office. Without that, this could not be accomplished. And also for Mr. Brown for all his assistance with the Board of County Commissioners in getting the legal requirements through the deed restrictions and the covenances in a form and a fashion that will suit us today as well as suit us in the future. This is an excellent opportunity for the students, the staff, and the parents and the community for this piece of property. Katie, once again, I want to thank you for the excellent work on the terms and conditions of the donation. She is ensuring that make sure that all items with the transactions, all I's are dotted, all T's are crossed, and the title will transfer to us in good order with no outstanding exceptions. Mr. Brown, thank you very much for your hard work with your legal staff. The deed restriction came with some covenances that were not in our best interest for long term, meaning that it would restrict us from the ability to borrow money on the site should we choose to. That is not our intention. It is primarily to be used foundation money for any activity on that site for building track, facilities, or et cetera. However, should the need arise 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now that we want to borrow money via COPS, we have to have certain restrictions and covenants and words in that deed. Through Mr. Brown and his team and Katie at the end, we were able to put that in the restriction. So should we ever choose to borrow, we have no covenants and restrictions that will stop us. At closing, the lawsuit will be closed and dropped. The district will assume will assume clear and free ownership to the property. There will be no liens, and the district and the community will enjoy this property for many years to come.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. It is an honor to bring this to the board. This is a true reality of what we collectively can provide to our community when we're willing to partner, when we're willing to work together. And as we take on ownership and begin the next phase of creating design identifying funding for this. It's going to be a very, very exciting time in which I wholeheartedly believe you'll see the community come together to support something that has been a long-standing priority within our community. So it is with great thanks and appreciation that I allow Mr. Graves the opportunity to speak, and just truly thankful for his willingness to provide this opportunity for all in our community.
Is it okay to remove my mask? Thank you. Good afternoon. On December 4th, 2016, our family suffered an unimaginable tragedy. Our sweet and beautiful son, Jimmy, was taken from us. Jimmy was everything you could ask for in a son. He was loving, energetic, bright, and a student, and extremely gifted in athletics. He had an empathy about him that caused him to care for others. He had a heart for the less fortunate, the less popular, and kids that needed some help, whether it be in the classroom, the athletic field, or just needed a friend. We have heard countless stories about his kindness, his witness, and his heart for the underrepresented. Jimmy loved soccer, football, and track. In soccer, he played on a travel team out of Tampa, and when that coach left to become the director of soccer for Mississippi, he selected Jimmy to play on his Olympic development team in Mississippi. In football, Jimmy was selected to the USA under-15 football team 2 years in a row and had the honor and privilege of playing in the AT&T Stadium in Dallas on 2 occasions. He played freshman football at Vero Beach High School and was brought up to the varsity team in the playoffs. And Vero Beach High School retired his number 11, 2 seasons ago. In track, Jimmy ran with the youth team in Gifford and ran some of the best times in the state in the 100-meter and 400-meter races, and he planned on running track at Vero Beach High School. In running track with the youth team, Jimmy was concerned about the facilities available to him and his teammates. Oftentimes, the kids would literally run in the dirt at Gifford Park. Once in a while, they would get on the track at the Vero Beach High School to train. Later, we all learned that Vero Beach High School did not have a regulation track. Countless kids have either graduated or did not participate simply due to the school not having a regulation track. The issue became important to Jimmy as well as our family, and if he were here, he would surely say, "Dad, let's try and help." When Jimmy passed, our family was devastated, and we wanted to do something significant for this community that helped raise our son and took us into their arms at our time of grief. We inquired about purchasing the 16th Street ball fields, which the county had announced they intended to sell. The county graciously sold us the land. Our intent was to build a public-private partnership for a community track that would be accessible not only to the Vero Beach High School students, but the community as well. In the time that we have owned the land, we have invested additional sums of money to clean up the land, remove dilapidated field houses and fences and antiquated lights. We've also installed 5 acres of sod that hosted countless youth sports, including a flag football league this past fall. We have literally served thousands of kids. However, it became apparent that we could not continue this venture alone. In spring last year, we were approached by a developer to buy the land. A representative from the Jimmy Graves Foundation reached out to many organizations and nonprofits in our community, but there were no viable partners. After about 60 days after receiving the contract, we signed it. After we signed it, I was introduced to Brian Barefoot, with whom I was not previously acquainted. And I remember sitting on a sidewalk in North Carolina while on vacation and talking to him about his vision for the fields. He had ideas that were very exciting, and he planted a seed in my mind that day. Weeks later, I asked the developer to allow us to cancel the contract based on that conversation so they could give us another try. And then the election happened. Brian Barefoot, as well as Dr. Jones, have taken seats on this board, and the comments that were made by Ms. Berenberg and the other members of the school district, we listened to those and we heard them, and we heard your discussion while you were making them, and we are greatly appreciative. Originally, when I met with Dr. Moore and Mr. Barefoot, I wanted to sell this property and recoup our investment. I thought there was no way our dream for these fields would ever come true. After speaking with Mr. Barefoot and Dr. Moore, I learned of their vision of a community track. I became excited. The stars aligned. This is what we've been fighting for 4 years. I went home after our last meeting at the fields and I prayed about what we should do. After much thought and reflection, Carol and I were led not to sell the property, but to gift it to the school district. We do not want to be mere bystanders, but we want to be involved in making this happen in our community. My wife taught in public schools almost 20 years, some at Sebastian with Dr. Jones. And since we purchased the property, God has blessed our family with 3 more children who are here today. Our older girls are married and live out of town and couldn't be here. Emily, our oldest, is in Atlanta teaching violin and going back to school to be an engineer, and is a proud graduate of Vero Beach High School. Sarah, our middle daughter, is a teacher in her first year and is literally in the classroom right now in Alachua County. What a year to start. Sophia is here. She's a student at Charter High School. And Rachel and Stephen are students at Gifford Middle School. And we are so blessed to have them. Our entire family stands here today, honored and blessed to be a part of this. We appreciate the Indian River County Commissioners for giving us this opportunity. I appreciate their willingness to work with us during this time. When I purchased the land, I made a promise to them to safeguard this land for the community. Today, I fulfill the promise to do the right thing by giving this land to the Indian River County School District. I want to thank the members of the school board, Dr. Moore and Mr. Barefoot, and I want to thank God for blessing our family and giving us the opportunity to make this gift. I am grateful for the community and the strong leadership that we have on this school board. You are all truly making a difference, and I appreciate your willingness to serve our children. Thank you very much.
Very, very, very powerful. And this time I'd ask Mr. Jason Brown to take the podium.
All right, good afternoon, members of the school board. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. That's a tough act to follow, I'll say, from Mr. Graves. But I want to say that the county is very happy with the solution that you have before you today. I think from the unspeakable tragedy that the Graves family has endured, I think something is positive is going to come out of it at this property with the donation of this land to the school district. I believe that the school district will do great things with this property, and it will be a benefit to the community. I can tell you it's been great to work with your staff, with Mr. Graves and his representatives to end up at this result. There is the deed restriction issue that will be addressed with the restrictive covenant that the school district has agreed to enter on this property for all parties, for the benefit of all parties. Appreciate working with your staff on that. We will be presenting this to the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday, February 2nd, and staff is happy to support recommending the restrictive covenant so that we can help move this transaction along. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and we're looking forward to great things. I do want to add as one item of note, I think when I attended Vero Beach High School, the property that is today the Jimmy Graves complex, back then, the parking lot anyway was called the junior parking lot. And I remember parking there in 1990, thereabouts. And when the county was first determined we didn't need this property anymore, one of my thoughts all along has been the school board is a natural home for that. I think that property belongs with the school board, and I think it's come full circle, and we have ended up with a great result for the school district, for the county, for the community as a whole. So with that, thank you.
So with that, board, this is not the conclusion, but yet the opportunity that opens the door for us to get to work to create this facility and bring to life the opportunity to provide that regulation track, that opportunity for our community to come together, create a green space, create a walking path for our community. This is just not an opportunity to provide a facility. This is just not an opportunity to honor the memory of Jimmy Graves. This is an opportunity to enhance our community. So I'm very excited to present this to you tonight. And I'll pause right here for any questions, concerns, or acknowledgements you may have.
If I could just offer a couple of comments. I remember the day, Joe, when I called you and you were in North Carolina. I didn't know you were walking the beach, but you were there. And I'd become aware of all of the background, if you will, over the month or two previously, reading about it in the newspaper, that, you know, the idea of developing it, some of the issues with the county. And when I called you, I'm saying to myself, this is a no-brainer. How did we get this far without not having this thing teed up in the way that we see it teed? This was long before the election. And I followed that conversation with you up. I had a conversation with Dylan Reingold to get some perspective on the legal issues. And it became fairly apparent to me that this was something that could be solved. I remember meeting a couple of times with Bill Mott at the fields, watching, you know, little kids playing flag football in one field. I don't remember what was going on in the other, but there was a lot of activity, a lot of excitement, and that's really what it's all about. So in speaking with some of my friends who have been very supportive of a lot of the not-for-profits in the community, I felt that if we could get something concluded here, that there was going to be financial support in the community, however this quote-unquote transaction would take place. So here we are today, fast forward, and I think this is a major opportunity for the entire community to benefit, and I would like to thank you, Carol, and your entire family for the professionalism, the caring manner in which all these discussions have gone on, and I can't wait to see that track open. So thank you. Jerry.
Sure. I just wanted to thank you again to the Graves family for this generous donation, and to the Jimmy Graves Foundation. I know that you have a group of people that work tirelessly to make sure that his name is forefront in what you're trying to do. And I assure you that his name will be forefront in what we're trying to do. So I look forward to this vision. We've talked a long time about this track and about what else can happen on that land. I know when I first moved here, I played a lot of softball on those fields, and it was kind of sad to see that that has gone away, but other things have replaced it. And so I'm sure that new things that will come to fruition will not just be for kids, but will be for families in Indian River County. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Jones.
Mr. and Mrs. Graves, we are blessed to have you in our community. I remember the junior parking lot that Jason was talking about, and I remember talking to Dr. Moore when I was campaigning, and I said I had some calls from community members because they thought, where can we go out and just be on a field and there's not a locked gate, you know, with COVID and everything. So this is absolutely a win-win for our community and our students, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Ms. Rosario.
Make sure this is on. Hi, my name is Jackie. We haven't had the pleasure of meeting. I've heard your son's story, and it is an absolute pleasure to be a board member today. I have to say, it's never easy to sit here and hear of a tragic story of a parent losing a child. It's never easy. And if you're a parent, you know that. So it is extremely honoring that you would consider this donation to the school district on behalf of your son, his memory and his legacy, and all that was near and dear to him. I can't imagine what you both and your family have gone through during this time. But I hope and I pray, as you have prayed for this opportunity, I hope and I pray that you will continue to come beside us at all of the unveilings throughout the process of actually getting it up and running, and so that not only is there accountability, but that there is continued partnership in this. It's exciting for me. My son has always talked about joining a track or being a part of that, and as a homeschooler, there aren't very many opportunities. But this brings me hope to even that community as well, and it's extremely, it's heartwarming. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Dr. Schiff?
I don't know if this is on. Is this on? Thank you. There's not a lot I can add to what my fellow board members have said. I have not, I think we have known of each other, but not yet been able to connect in person. And I am looking forward to the process of that happening in this extraordinary donation. Mr. Graves, when I heard I have known of the story, but I have never heard it told as you just told it. And as a parent and as the mom of a now 17-year-old, though it in no way compares to your experience, my heart breaks at hearing that story, and I am I'm obviously a little speechless, but which I'm not often. To turn a tragedy, an unspeakable tragedy, into a gift to this community speaks to extraordinary generosity, to extraordinary ability to rise up, for which I think we are all grateful. We are grateful in this community, we are grateful in this district, we are grateful in this school board, and every child who benefits from that donation will, as Mrs. Barenborg said, know from whence it came, and I look forward to honoring the memory of your son in how we proceed with this. I am excited about the prospects of what we will get to do and the honor that that will be to your son and his legacy and to your family. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the grace of this.
Dr. Moore?
So just in closing, I want to clearly state that this is not the norm. This is individuals willing to come together and support one another. And when me and my wife started to seek where to be a superintendent or ask for consideration to be a superintendent, this is the exact feeling that we desired, to have this opportunity, politics put aside, complexities of things that need to be negotiated, put aside, rolling up the sleeves, getting to work, and then coming together to bring together such an important piece of what will be history in this county in terms of the use, the agreement, and the collective understanding to support one another. So this is a very, very, very good day. So with the indulgence of the board, I was just hoping we could pause for a second, have the Graves family come up, Mr. Brown with the board, and take a picture, if that's okay. Socially distant, of course.
Sure.
Kristen, you're up.
efficient than I about that.
Front row, take 2 steps to the right, please. Just trying to get everyone centered. One more step to the right. Okay, one more, sorry. There you go. Okay, now everyone kind of make a window to make sure we can see everyone.
What, right? Make a window?
Sorry, bud.
Go ahead, you're in control.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, new plan. Mrs. Davenport. I'm tall. And Dr. Jones, if you could just both, no, let's just put a space between the two of you so that we can see the Graves family a little bit better.
Perfect, right there.
Hey, Doc, a little tiny bit more. So sorry, I went. There you go. So sorry, we're just trying to make this, perfect here. All right. Ready, 1, 2, and 3. Smile with your eyes. Okay, and Mr. Brown, would you join
Mr. Fagan,
in the back row?
get up here.
Yes.
Get Mr. Fagan up here. Get up. You're the one that have to work, come on.
I hope it takes a long
I
time.
know. Yes.
That's really gonna throw me off. Could you get in the back row, Mr. Junior?
Absolutely. Part of the Graves family now.
There we go. You're part of the family now. That's great. All right.
Uncle Ron.
Yeah, we blend right in.
I was gonna say Papa.
Okay. Ready, everyone? 1, 2, and 3.
All right, thank you. Good stuff, folks.
My blanket.
Jason, one of these days, I feel like we should have more of a conversation than we've ever gotten to have, and I haven't reached out.
Happy to.
But I would love to do that at some point. People keep saying to me, we need to know each other better.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
Ay, ay, ay.
Now, I didn't get to ask before, but are they not coming tonight? Are they not able to come tonight, or no?
Just based on the schedule, we all thought this was the best time to have that, so,
Okay.
families.
I think tonight we can certainly recap, not rehash, recap, summarize. What a great example. When you're in a position to do something like this, it can benefit so many. It doesn't come along often, but it's nice to be able to be part of something that will make such a difference forever in so many kids' lives. Well, the families too, but primarily the youth sports.
Mr. Barefoot, if I could?
Sure.
Is there a way, I think this is a Kristen and Chris question, because I don't know that we taped his speech separately, but it will be on the recording, and I wonder if we could play that tonight so people could hear his words tonight?
What a great idea.
Great idea, yeah.
And if we could at least play that, and at least have, some of the pictures and acknowledge some of that tonight, I'd appreciate if we could add that to the
That's such a
schedule.
great idea.
that's the most powerful part of it, so absolutely.
Um,
All right, the next
Next.
agenda item is the review of our school calendar that is coming up for approval in February. And many of you may recall, as we reviewed this item last year, there was a great deal of concern, both by myself as well as the board, whether it be the early release days that were taking place, the loss of instructional time, both because of the early release day, as well as the condensed amount of time children were in class during those particular days. There were 8 early release days at the end of each semester, which once again were not being used the way they should have, and once again, condensing schedules. The structure of the calendar, the timeliness of the calendar were all concerns, and ultimately the volume of instructional time that wasn't being maximized was a driving force and a commitment to be made to really take the time to create a calendar in which puts the thought of children's first, living the mantra, being best by kids. And I believe what you have here today, and I won't steal the big wins from Ms. Emerson, but I want to acknowledge first Mr. Meyer as well as Mr. Emerson, who have led this work. Mr. Meyer is listed on the agenda, so I'll let him tee up Ms. Emerson's presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, and I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. I remember last year was my first item I got to present to the board, and it was one that a lot of hard work went into by my predecessors, but we all know what that's like when someone does the work and you present it. This year was a lot different. We got to lead the work, and I didn't lead as much of the work as Ms. Emerson did. It was a gift to me in my office that through Dr. Moore's reorganization that I got a director of instructional innovation, and so when we said that we were going to put the instructional calendar under C&I. We were very excited about that, actually, and Ms. Emerson was the one tasked to do that, and she's done a phenomenal job of working to develop this over the past few months. And as Dr. Moore said, we got a ton of wins, and so the product that we are presenting to you, it has my 100% backing. We went, through so many different committee stops, different thought partners of doing this, thinking about it, 10 ways from Sunday, and I'm very, very excited from what we're going to be able to do next year with this calendar. So, Ms. Emerson, show us the good work.
Great, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here as a facilitator of the conversation, working with just an incredibly diverse group of individuals and stakeholders. So we always start with our unified mission and guiding principles as a district, focusing in on our strategic plan, which is to transform education, to inspire and empower all students to maximize their true and full potential. And so what we were tasked with was creating an innovative instructional calendar, really maximizing on instructional time and creating the best possible systems for SDIRC growth. And with change comes, a lot of experiential differences. And so we brought in all the stakeholders that we could. So we have IRCEA, CWA members. We had heard in the past that calendars had been presented without having finance involved. The finance department was with us on this every step of the way, as well as parents and community members. I feel like what we did really well was bringing in the stakeholders and ensuring that all voices were heard. What I'm excited about is the calendar that is being presented was unanimously approved by the entire committee after a long experience with us in the room, locked in there together, really setting what our non-negotiables were going to be. We came up with this and agreed upon it together. And so we did have norms that we followed, and one of the things that was very important to us was surveying the committee, providing as many opportunities as we could for feedback. On top of the meetings that we had that transpired, we were sending draft copies back and forth, making adjustments, and we created assurances that we weren't going to just stop with working on the calendar for this year, but that we really wanted to do best by our community by putting out a tentative draft copy for 2022, 2023, and 2023, 2024. I'm very happy to say after our last meeting, the Instructional Calendar Committee has approved the recommended 2022-2023 calendar as well. And so we have one more meeting coming up that we'll be working on the final draft of the 2023-2024 calendar, which is very exciting. High-performing school districts all over the country, they work years in advance so that they can do the planning that is needed to be innovative. And so we do have some great wins in here, and I'd love to share those with everyone here today, starting with the elimination of 16 early release days. With all of the stakeholders in the room, this was one of the non-negotiables, and it was something discussed last year in the Instructional Calendar Committee, so they were very eager to chomp at the bit at this and get the work in. What this allowed us to do was increase 21 instructional hours. The feedback we got from families was that this just provides so much more stability for them, knowing that they're not going to have to plan for this one random Wednesday every month for childcare. It just allows them to have uniformity throughout their schedule and less distractions in the day. As a former principal, those days were difficult to manage. Knowing that there's a change of routine is sometimes not easy for students or teachers. And those early release days were very difficult to then focus back in on professional development after 6 long hours of instruction and working. Another great win is that this is approved by the Veterans Council. We will not be having school on Veterans Day from here on out. What we have agreed to is ensuring that we are still providing celebrations the day prior to Veterans Day and that our band is available out in the community as they're doing presentations on the day of Veterans Day. And so our principals at the high school all agreed that that was important for all of us. Teacher autonomy and choice, it's something we talk about all the time, but now we're creating the systems and structures for that to be a reality. We have created 4 optional days for teacher planning. This will allow teachers to choose from those 4 days which 2 are most important for them to come into work to do their planning. One of the survey responses we got back from putting this out there is that we're going to have to do some professional development for everyone in the community on what this means. This would not be a day where we will be having principals leading the work. These will be days for teachers to come in and plan and prep for the work that they're doing in their rooms. And so we're really excited. We talk about this, but now we have a system in place to really give teachers the professionalism we expect from them. We also were able to add in 2 full-focus professional development days. This allows for so much flexibility for our principals and our community. Just thinking ahead to all the opportunities that schools now have, having these 2 additional professional development days, whether it's Fellsmere Elementary wanting to go up to University of Central Florida as they're partnering for dual language and going and visiting sites, or our school district bringing in consultants and experts to help us lead the work in professional development. We now have full days already embedded into our instructional calendar, 2 additional days. And one of the things that the parents requested and staff was to make the calendar more user-friendly. Instead of having to navigate all over the website to find out when our open house dates are and graduation, they're all now on this one document. And we've even gone through the effort with parents and support from all of our stakeholders in aligning what days are going to work best for our secondary open house so that parents aren't competing with whether they're going to go to their elementary child or their high school child's conference night or open house night. It is all now specifically delineated here in the instructional calendar. And as I just mentioned, we also have the recommended instructional calendar for 2022-2023 that the calendar committee has approved as of our last meeting. So very exciting work, and I'm just very humbled to be a part of such a strong committee that put in the work together to make this a reality.
So just to give the board a sense as to where we are at, we are in the final stages of bringing the item to the board for approval. We still have final stages of union approval to take place, but don't anticipate there to be any issues or concerns in that final meeting. That was discussed. We also have feedback that I received from board members during our briefings, as well as feedback from the community from the survey that went out, which needs to be shared with that committee as well. And I think what we have here is an opportunity to ensure that a item comes before the board, it has been fully vetted, allows for long-term planning, while at the same time puts children first, maximizes the amount of time that we're in classroom, honors the time that we provide for educators to conduct and engage in meaningful planning. So this is work we all should be proud of. So with slight modifications or changes, minor, we would anticipate bringing this item to the board in first or second February. Probably the first meeting of February, if that final round of feedback doesn't require major changes, which at this point we don't think that it will. So that is the item.
Any comments, questions? Mrs. Rosario?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much, Mrs. Emerson, for being as thorough as you were in your presentation. Dr. Moore, when we hired you, we knew that as a board at the time prior to Mr. Barefoot and Dr. Jones coming on, joining the board, we knew that we needed organization, but sometimes your planning is so far ahead.
We're still not where I want it.
It's not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing. And this is just one of those examples where we actually, in previous years, as you all, many people know, received the instructional calendar very close into the spring, like spring term. Other counties have already had them out, and ours is still just coming to us. This is the first time that I think it's coming to us this early, and it's actually a good thing. But to receive 3 years in a row is almost like you want to shout hallelujah.
Yes.
But my question is, how does this, or will it, or can it, the 2022, 23, the next 2 years up to 24, how do those, if we're planning our instructional calendar, how does that work with regard to negotiations? Are the future years going to be tentative? Are they going to be final? And where are we with negotiations in terms of settling with a long-term contract or not? So how does this all work together?
So this is new to all of us. So the additional years would be tentative. And I think in this round, as we honor the process, calling them tentative in year 2 and year 3 is the right way, because there are so many shifts and changes to the style and design of this particular calendar. So taking the time to say, in theory and principle, we all agree, but as we implement, we will be reflective in our practice and learn. I think the important things from a member of the community is that long-term planning. The big one has always been, when is that spring break? When does summer start? What are the 2-week time frames that we have off for the December break? Solidifying those. So I think in those areas there'll be minimal movement. Some of the other things may shift or modify, but to have that information available, and then as we grow the work forward, then we can, in years 5, 6, 7, 8, as we continue to renew contracts or calendars, they would be, we would not need the tentative because we've grown accustomed to it. The second question is, they're just completed the ratification process for the teachers in the process now. We anticipate bringing that 3-year deal to the board also in February, the first board meeting in February. So we're excited to bring that as well, which was your second question.
And then, thank you. And then the last, just so board members know, one of the things that I had conversation with Dr. Moore and Mrs. Emerson on were few of the yellows in there. Few of them just said no school, with no indication as to what that meant. And so I kind of have asked if we could, for example, Monday, November 23rd, the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, that Thanksgiving week, if we can call that recess days or something, or fall, something, so that there's a distinction as to why those days are off.
Absolutely, and when we circle back with the committee, we have that feedback as well as the feedback from the survey that went out in the community, and we're to honor the process and sharing that feedback and get recommendations from the committee to ensure it's a solidified process.
And just to let you know, there were 3 of those occasions that I shared with both Dr. Moore and Mrs. Emerson. Mrs. Emerson, thank you so much.
Dr. Jones?
Thank you very much, Ms. Emerson and Mr. Meyer. I think we have all the stakeholders in on this. It will go very smoothly. And as a former principal on those Wednesday early release, I could not always remember who was doing what, school, district, you know. So there's a lot of extra work. But especially in today's time, we've got to grab every minute with our students. And I think teachers and staff feel that way too. But the balance of those 2 PD days and then the 4 planning days, that's marvelous. Thank you.
Mrs. Barrenborg?
Sure. Yeah, great work. I know this is a lot of work. I sat in on the calendar committees last year, and it is a struggle. People don't think that's a big deal to come up with something like that, but it is. So those op days, those are what you would refer to in the olden days as work days, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think that does need to be communicated really well, because I think there's a misunderstanding as to what teachers do on those days, so I think that's important that we do that. Also, thank you for putting out those parent surveys, because I think last year's committee learned a lot from parent surveys and took in some things that they really didn't think were going to be a problem, and realized, oh, okay, that is a major problem for parents, so we appreciate that. Veterans Day was the biggie last year also, so I'm glad to hear that the Veterans Council is fine with us taking off for that day, because I know they went back and forth between off and on and off and on, so I'm glad to see that that's all worked out. When will the board vote on the future tentative calendars? Because I feel uncomfortable having something up on the website that says tentative without the board members having approved it.
Through the chair, we'll bring those to the board once the committee has finalized those 2, so you have the ample time to look at, review, and provide feedback before, seeing it. You won't see it on the day of approval.
Great, because, I know what happens with a calendar is people look at it and say, oh, that's great, and then they start to make plans, and then they realize later, wait a minute, that doesn't fit in with my plans, and then that's when we get the phone call. So I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Dr.
Yeah, a
Schiff?
couple things. Thanks. Won't repeat all of that. Mrs. Rosario made me think when you acknowledged sort of thinking ahead. And you reminded me that when you were hired, and this may not be the best time for it, but when you were hired, you were given that 5-minute scenario. And your response was, well, this isn't going to be a problem because we're going to have policies and protocols in place so that everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do under each of these scenarios.
COVID wasn't in that.
Correct. But Mrs. Rosario's comment got me thinking about how many areas in which you actually have done that. The HR policies that we didn't have in place that you have been and are continuing to work on structuring so we don't keep reinventing the same wheels. The SAM model that we didn't have before. We were able to adapt to COVID last spring because before we shut down, you had all been working on how we were going to do that. And while it didn't, nothing ever, like that ever goes off without a glitch and a hitch, we did better than a lot of districts and continue to because of the planning and foresight. The union negotiations, where we have not for many years had the prospect of 3-year contracts, where we have resolved issues sort of before they come in crisis to the board. So in keeping with this, I just want to acknowledge that this is consistent with who you said you were going to be when you were hired, and it's part of a continuum. And I know that sort of in my own work, when we wait in my work, it's semester to semester, my other work, semester to semester, but you never know what your schedule is going to look like, and it's really frustrating. Or people make assumptions based on what happened in the past that are not appropriate for what might happen in the future. So I appreciate the long-range planning in this, as well as the other things I've mentioned and the ones I didn't. All of that said, can you tell me, Ms. Emerson, You said there were 2 additional PD days. Can you tell me how many total PD days there are?
Yes. So I believe we are now at 32 hours of professional development. Those are broken up where some of the days are half-day teacher planning and professional development, which is delineated right in the actual verbiage of the calendar. So the exact days, if you give me a second, I could count them specifically, because we've gone back and forth, and I don't want to misinterpret. We've adjusted. So that would be 8 full days for professional, well, 8 days of professional development, some of them half days, some of them full days.
Got it. And my understanding is that we typically plan pretty far in advance what's going to happen on those days, right? So teachers have the option or have scheduled their professional development pretty far in advance for those, right?
Right. In January, there's often time for us to evaluate our data as principals and make decisions on what you need to do, what's the next step for your staff. But yes, planning ahead is always ideal.
Can you tell me, because I'm not clear in this calendar, and I'm sure you planned for it, what we call hurricane days or makeup days. Where do those fall into this calendar?
So because we've increased our instructional hours, we do not have any emergency days put into this calendar.
Can you say a little more about that? I'm not sure I follow.
Let me take a stab at it. And looking what other counties do across the state and looking at what we did last year, we just decided to take days off and take them off if we had a hurricane, which is not the way to go. We have instructional hours built into the day. More years than not, there are opportunities where you don't have to make up days. So being very intentional in looking at, those PD days, if there were opportunities to shift or modify because of a hurricane and we missed and went below the threshold of hours, that would be the opportunity to sit with the union and define what those particular days would be. So PD days would have to be negotiated or contract days to say these would be the days in which we would come back to school. But taking days off, claiming that we're going to take them off, isn't a consistent practice that we should be following. So very in line with what other districts and systems are doing.
Yeah, just to make sure I understand this, because I'm not sure I do. Because last year we got into a bit of a muddle about how those happened, and then we had, well, a variety of things happened. And we wound up taking off some sort of random days because of that. But let's say, for example, because I'm not sure I follow this, and forgive me if you guys get it and I don't, and I'm slow on the uptake here. But let's say we have a hurricane in August or September, which is when we're most likely to have it, and we miss 3 days or 2 days, which I know is our least favorable option, and I know we wait as long as we can to make the call to cancel school as we're planning this. If we have to miss 2 days in September, how is this calendar going to adjust for those?
So,
May I help?
Yeah.
2 years ago, the Florida Administrative Code changed in that you can have 180 days or 900 instructional hours. And so if we have over the 900 instructional hours, then we do not have to make up the days. And so the calendar has built into it enough instructional time that
Got it.
even with a number of days missing, we are still in excess of that. So that's why the increase of 21 instructional hours is so beneficial to us, because
Got it.
by taking away those half days, we're able to, in that event, not have to make those up.
Totally understand. I was slow on the uptake. You did explain this. Thank you.
I think that was a better explanation.
I got it from him, not from you. So clearly, he should explain to me now. Thank you.
Ms. Rosario?
Yes, sorry, thank you. I remembered a couple of questions that I had that I'd rather ask now, if that's okay, other than waiting for tonight or some other time. The three parents that were on the committee, what were the representations of those 3 parents in terms of grade levels in our district?
One of the parents is elementary, middle, and high school.
So we had one
Yes.
from each.
Another one is middle and high, and the other one did not disclose what grade level her child is in, and I did not ask.
So in thinking, moving forward for the tentative years would we then not have a committee meeting because we've already established what that was? Or would we engage in a committee if there were changes that needed to be made? How would that?
Just to protect the board, my recommendation, we always engage in a committee, ensuring that we're just not bringing a product to the board that doesn't have consensus of the community
Got it.
and all employees.
So considering that, I would recommend that we try our best to get more parent or community involvement in that, because we had so many more representation in the other areas, but the parents, there were only 3. And that just kind of, I mean, I'm glad to see that we had from each grade level, but it would be nice to have that feedback
Yeah.
from a greater pool of voices.
And I didn't want to misrepresent, but a lot of the teachers and staff that were on there are also parents too.
Okay.
So maybe I'll make sure to put that if they hit in both areas, because they
Maybe
were
a little
speaking.
asterisk.
Yes,
That'll
yes,
be
it's a
good.
great idea.
Thank you. I had another follow-up question. Dr. Moore, two things, actually. One of them is the optional days moving next year and the following year. I'm curious to see what would be used of those optional days. Are we able to take a survey once the year begins to kind of see how teachers are choosing to use them? Just so we can evaluate whether it's effective or not, and you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. I think what we'll do is, once fully approved, Ms. Emerson, myself, maybe even union representation, we'll put together a kind of a question and answer scenario, so everyone fully understands the optional days, as Ms. Barenborg was saying, something very, very new to this system. So making sure they fully understand the opportunities of when to select those particular days. And then we'll use that data to determine, A, is it working, or B, teachers leveraging this opportunity, and in future years, other opportunities to enhance or accelerate that level of flexibility.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask a third one, but.
Any further comments, questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Thank you, Ms. Emerson, for leading that work, or continuing to lead that work, because you're not done yet. Next item will be relatively quickly. It is the review of the Palm Gardens nursing clinical agreement. As Mr. Meyer briefed with you, this is a renewal of a partnership with this organization or company to allow our students our nursing students to participate in the practicum. That's the hands-on experience at that particular school. Because of COVID now, this opportunity isn't being provided, rightfully so. But at this time, some information has been brought to me, which is going to require me to do a little additional research. And I would not present an item to the board until I'm 100% sure that the organization in which we're engaging in is an honorable organization that does the best work for individuals within our community and who they serve. And that internship really results in a high productive environment, and the level of integrity is all in all. So there's gonna pull this item, allow me to do that research. While at the same time, as Mr. Meyer had mentioned, this is an attempt to be extremely proactive, and we're looking to bring agreements all at one time. We want to expand these opportunities for our students within multiple organizations. So that's the update on that. Next item is the overview of the fourth joint status report. And let me provide that information to our board now. As you know, during December, we had a joint meeting between the NAACP and our school board. It was a very productive meeting in which we came to a great deal of consensus on how to collaborate. Some highlights from that meeting is that the board and the NAACP would meet 4 times annually throughout the year, and that we would align those meetings with the joint reports that were due to the court. So very, very specific in terms of the work that was being done and monitored over a quarterly basis to ensure that we continued to build upon that relationship. Consensus of that meeting in December is that we would notify the courts that we would not conduct the equity committee's evaluation of our work. The consensus was there because of COVID, the inconsistencies of data that was created. that conducting an evaluation would not be as productive as we would want it to be because data wasn't consistent, too many influencers on outcome, and from a district perspective, initiatives being implemented didn't yield the result or have the opportunity to implement because of COVID. We were to draft a letter and notify the courts of that by the end of January. On December 7th, I had the opportunity to draft that letter based on the meeting that took place in December. I sent that to board for feedback. On the 15th, I was able to incorporate the feedback that I received from board members and then send that to the NAACP for their review. Then on the 22nd, I had the opportunity to participate in a meeting with two members of the NAACP as well as our board chair and receive feedback from the NAACP regarding the letter that we had crafted. It was a good conversation in which we were able to gain a great deal of clarity on the content and substance of that particular letter. What was being requested and agreed upon by me was to focus the update on the goals within the joint plan, as well as the recommendations that were provided to the school board by the first equity committee, and those recommendations came to the board in November of 2019. I committed to doing that work, and I sent a draft for feedback from the NAACP, which is 125, which was yesterday, and I copied the board and sent it to the board so you saw the revised update. It is a lengthy report. Initially, I thought it would be very precise and to the point, but there were 57 recommendations made by the Equity Committee in 2019. So what I did is put together that work as it was jointly agreed upon, sent it to the NAACP for some initial feedback. And I think that's important, rather than sending here's a completed product, but this is where I am to this particular point. Are we still in consensus in what we're developing? And as I have said to each of you, and you have clearly expressed to me, working together on such a sensitive issue is a priority for this board. It is a priority for the NAACP, and it is surely a priority of mine. So in order not to rush the work, we agreed, let's not, make ourselves crazy. Let's notify the courts, which both Mr. Brown and I were in the court and heard from the Judge Williams herself. If the two of you agree on something, all you have to do is let me know. The desire is for you all to work together, and if you agree, then you're working together. I sent Mr. Brown a copy of a letter, and we're getting pretty good at notifying the courts these days, of our opportunity to reschedule these meetings so we can continue not to rush the process and work collaboratively in the agreement. In that communication, I proffered the next joint meeting to be 2/9/21, which would be our first meeting in February under the same parameters in which the initial meeting in January was going to take place. It would start at 5:30, and we would publicly notice that the board meeting would not start, our business meeting would not start until we've concluded that meeting. And that way NAACP wouldn't think as if we're rushing through this very important meeting, because the reality is that we're not. That the joint report to the board would be due to them on the 15th of February, which we would submit and make sure it's to the courts by the 15th, and that the first equity meeting would be on the 16th, in which the two members of the school board, the two school board members and the NAACP members would select the chair of the committee. I'm still waiting for feedback on those particular days from the NAACP. Complete transparency, that information was sent yesterday, and he does, the president of the NAACP, need to verify those dates, so it's not a simple process where he just says yes or no. It's checking calendars with his executive board, so we'll allow him the appropriate amount of time to do so. That is where we are currently at. It is important to know that this district has completely redefined itself in terms of priorities around equity, and a great deal of work has been done. And as a system, we should be proud of the work that we've done, and not shy away from difficult, in some cases, uncomfortable conversations, really to move this work forward. And that is exactly what we're doing. That is where we are with getting this information to the courts. The information, the joint report to the courts, I feel very, very comfortable with the conversation that we had last week and the level of clarity that I have received, and looking forward to continue to move this work forward. But I'll be happy to answer any questions board members may have.
You know, but before, I just want to add a couple of comments. Over the last few weeks, I've had several conversations with Dr. Warrior, and at least one meeting and 2 conversations with Mr. Brown. And I think the thing that has been missing from their standpoint, and frankly from mine, is the lack of specificity in terms of statements are made of the work that's been done, but yet where is the data confirming that, in fact, the work's been done? And if I were them, I would wonder, well, you know, you said that you've done this, where is the specificity? So the meeting the other day, that's how we went from 2 pages to however many it's going to be, and with bullet points addressing the goals and what's been achieved. And it's okay to say we have only made modest progress, no progress, lots of progress, but back it up with the specificity required in each case. So I think, I hope maybe is the right choice of words, that we're on the same page in terms of what expectations are, because I think in the past, perhaps the expectations of the NAACP were a little different than what perhaps we thought we were going to deliver to them. And recommendations end up being viewed as conclusions as opposed to perhaps recommendations, but I do think that, as Dr. Morris suggested, we're on the right track. And I think the feedback we get here over the next few days will make it even clearer as to what their expectations are in terms of backing up the comments that are made with very specific conclusions. Ms. Rosario?
Thank you. It was my understanding that we all agreed when we last met that what would be sent would be a summary that really captured, you know, that quite honestly, not much has been done because of COVID. And that's exactly what you created because we were all on that same page with that. And though I kind of like now the second draft, I suppose we can say. I like the second draft in terms of its format and how we have the bulleted points, but what we do not have in this is what you just described, Mr. Barefoot, which are what has been accomplished. What is in this, in our email, only states our goal and the recommendations, but not what has already been accomplished. So we're still back at, you know, not much has been accomplished because of COVID. So can I just kind of, somebody help clarify? We meet, we discuss, we all agree what we're going to send, and then it keeps changing. So all these changes that are happening outside of our agreed upon meetings. And so and this is part, and some of what I'm saying might be rhetorical, I'm not sure. Who wants to comment on this? Some of this seems a bit frustrating because every time we try to take 2 steps forward, I feel like we're taking 5 steps back. You know, we agree that we're going to move forward with these 2 steps, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, it's like, nope, that's not what I wanted something else. So we've got to change it and come back to the board. And if we keep doing this, we're going to be going in this cycle of not getting anything done, pushing through, and then rushing or hearing, you know, why isn't anything getting done? We didn't have enough time to meet. We didn't have enough time to discuss, or we didn't have enough data. So I'm mentioning a few things here because I do appreciate the different version. It is much clearer in terms of having the NAACP's recommendations within what we're going to send to the court. I don't see what we have accomplished in that second meeting, and then how can we stop this cycle so that we can actually get down to work?
Can I just respond to that? I think people listen and people hear. There's two different things. Just because you hear doesn't mean you're listening, and just because you're listening doesn't mean you hear. I think if I were to translate the disconnect that you point out, is that we sit here and we think there's a consensus. And then the next conversation or communication between representatives of the NAACP or Mr. Brown or Dr. Warrior, that's not what they necessarily heard or agreed to. And they take recommendations as opposed to definitive agreements. And there's a difference. I'm just pointing out how they view it as opposed to perhaps how Dr. Moore or some of us may have, interpreted what was agreed upon. I think what's important is that there's no disagreement, and I think Dr. Moore's outlined it pretty well, and I would expect that when you sent that draft out to them, before you took the next step, which is to fill in the bullet points will address just what you said, and that's what's been accomplished and what is to be accomplished, particularly as you've laid out a quarterly strategy for addressing the 90 action steps that are spread across the 5 different categories that are part of that consent agreement. So,
No, I think that is correct. What was sent was an opportunity to receive feedback before there was a completed product, and quite honestly, to honor the time of staff. My concern is all of this information is a backwards glance versus a forward movement, capturing what was done, what wasn't done, and it's easy to report what was done or what wasn't done. The ultimate authority on who evaluates and provide those recommendations, it is the Equity Committee. That is the roles and the responsibility, and that's clearly defined within the joint order. In order to create a cohesive relationship between the two entities, the judge proffered and parties agreed that the Equity Committee would be the evaluator of the work and provide recommendations to the school board, to the school board. And that is those recommendations that we included. So you said NAACP's recommendations, those were the Equity Committee's recommendations of 2019. We agreed in that joint meeting that evaluation would not take place this particular year by the Equity Committee. I am hesitant, and that's why that information isn't there yet, was to make sure that we're on the right path, that we do not engage in a back and forth regarding what was and wasn't done, because the Equity Committee is the authority that does that particular evaluation. Make no mistakes about it. The organization as a whole has done a plethora of work in creating a solid foundation that we will continue to focus in on for the next several years. Not just this year, not just next year, but for the next several years. But I really want to get us to a place where we're moving the work forward, and the conversation and the dialogue revolves around the action that is taking place in our schools today.
So the last part of my question or comment with regard to the data, where is the work? It's my understanding that you provided, 4 or 5 binders full of work that has been done.
That information, we created what we call libraries, which captures the work of each of the school sites, the district offices, really to ensure that that work was now being done. Is that information there? I think it's important to note that is the role of the Equity Committee to say, hey, is it being implemented, A, is it being successful, and these are the recommendations, moving forward. The process that I'm recommending takes a full year's worth of work for each of the 22 schools, the $300 million organization, and streamlines it down to just a 3-month window of time, which takes a daunting task for the equity committee and really streamlines it and says, hey, this is the areas within the joint plan, the areas within the African American Achievement Plan that the district is working on over the course of this period. These are the pieces of information, the artifacts that will naturally be corrected or created. And these are some possible probing questions you can ask yourself, not telling you how to evaluate the work, but as a starting point, these are particular areas that you can do. That would be the information that comes back to the two entities. And using the equity committee, just not at the end of the year, but using them throughout the year, really to provide feedback to the school system regarding the impact.
We're on the same page, because that's why we all agreed that we would meet with them periodically so that they can provide their feedback to the board in their advisory capacity, and then ultimately we can come up with some solutions to some of the ways in which we can eventually get out of this. But I still come back to the question of that Mr. Barefoot said, which is that there's nothing, or the assumption, or the wording, the verbiage was that there was nothing to provide that we have done. Where is the data? And we have the data.
But you know, the challenge is, in all fairness to all parties, when I saw Mr. Brown bring those binders in,
That's those were Dr. Moore's.
well, he brought his own, he said he hurt his back carrying them in. I don't know anybody, maybe somebody would have, but I could never have read that. There needs to be, and think about from the NACP standpoint, they don't have a staff. All they have is a group of volunteers, Mr. Brown, Dr. Warrior, their representatives on. It's really, if you want to get this solved, this is complex for sure, but the approach that was agreed upon at the meeting last week, the conference call, was it's almost like providing an executive summary of all of those 5,000 pages, whatever the number was. And rather than think about the work that has been done and not being recognized, it's very frustrating for both parties, I think, because they feel that we're not making the progress, even though it's all embedded in these binders. The staff feels, well, Jesus, we've busted our butts to produce what we produced. And I think the conclusion was, if we can provide the kind of format that Dr. Moore's, we've all seen a draft of, and then fill in with bullet points what's been accomplished, narrow the time frame so that the expectations are over a 3-month period. And if you get everything done, great. If you don't get everything done, that's fine, as long as you acknowledge the fact. I think we're on the right track, but I'm sure you all feel that have been dealing with this for the last few years, you thought you were on the right track before. And I think Marshawn Green, there's a transition in play. We're going to have 2 new board members, one from the NAACP, one from the district, which I guess we'll address tonight, and then they in turn have to select a board chair. And the amount of work that's required is quite a heavy lift, I think, for a group of 5 volunteers. So I think our job, Dr. Moore's job and staff, is to make their job in evaluating as easy as possible. And one of the easiest ways to do it is condense all that information into a product, a work product, which is what hopefully comes out of this exercise of going back and forth over the next week or so that when that equity committee meets in February, they really are able to focus in on what has been accomplished and acknowledge to the hard work that the staff at the district has done. I mean, that's the goal.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot. Dr. Moore, my last request is, can you please, in this, include the bullets of what has been accomplished? there are recommendations, but there aren't any there isn't a surmised kind of other area of bullets that do address what has been accomplished.
And I think that is the goal, but I'm going to honor and respect staff's time. I have created a number of documents, only have to recreate documents. And rather than say, here is a completed product, which taking all of that information and condensing it is complex, hard, difficult, timely work. So I want to ensure the information, the consensus that was established during that meeting, we're still on point. So it is almost a progress check regarding where we are. Is the document capturing what was captured, and then I could take the next step and load that information in. So I think building consensus is the right way to go.
So that was yes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot. Just a few points. This is about our students, and the NAACP, the school board, the district staff, we all want success for all of our students. And after reading the African American Achievement Plan a few times, over 100 pages, obviously we have some growth, but I think we need to continue. I don't know if this ever stops. It just will always continue and move on, and that's what we have to monitor, not for all students. When the judge declared this joint plan, they said, or she said it was between the NAACP and the school board, which is fine. But I think the most important thing she did was when she established an equity committee. So our job with recommending our people for the equity committee is very important, and the committee choosing a chair that will move forward is crucial. I like what Dr. Moore said when he suggested the dates to the NAACP about February 9th, the 15th, and the 16th, because they're all working people and their calendars have to be checked before time. One thing that I found, all of this was important, but one of the recommendations was that since a desegregation order is a priority, that the board place the district's progress toward meeting the deseg order on the agenda monthly as needed. And I think that's fine. That's something that we can continue to monitor. That's something we can continue to support. And I just think in general, we are talking about our students and their success. Everyone wants the same thing, and I think we can move forward and do the job we need to do.
Dr. Schiff, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, a couple things. This is a tricky issue, and I know we've spent innumerable hours talking about this. One of the things that Dr. Moore has shared with me will happen moving forward, that has already begun to happen, is that the conversations between Dr. Moore and Mr. Brown will now also include other ears. Mr. Barefoot, you referenced the difference between listening and hearing. I think that's part of it, and I am glad that moving forward, you'll be a part of hearing those conversations, excuse me, and once there is a chair of the equity committee, the presumption is that that person will also be there. Because what I continue to notice, and I think this speaks somewhat to Mrs. Rosario's concerns, and Dr. Moore and I have had innumerable conversations about this, is that it's not simply speaking and listening, it's how we hear those words. So when we hear a word like, for example, collaboration, that may mean one thing to me. It may mean a different thing to you or the person on the other end. And sometimes I fear that that's where the challenge has occurred. We are using language, we are hearing that language, but the words we're using don't mean the same thing.
Right.
So what Dr. Moore may interpret as collaboration may not be what Mr. Brown interprets as collaboration. And that's where we continue to get stuck. I think moving forward that having, and I'm using collaboration as an example, not as a definitive term, but I think that's part of why we continue to feel like we go in circles on this. Because we think we're listening and we think we're hearing, and we are. We just have different meanings attached to what some of those words mean. I think moving forward, having Mr. Barefoot there will make a difference, and having whoever is the chair of the equity committee there will make a difference, because I think we need, and I have said this before, both privately and publicly, there needs to be somebody who either understands the meanings of those words to both parties and can translate, or hears when the parties are agreeing to something using the same words but have different understandings of what that agreement means. I hope that makes some sense. To me, it's perfectly clear. It may sound like clear as mud to you. But I keep seeing that happen. And I know Dr. Moore and I have talked about this a lot, and I've talked about it with members of the NAACP. I'm hoping that's part of what can be accommodated moving forward by having the chair of the school board and the chair of the equity committee there. And I hope that we will get continued reports on that and continue to pay close attention to that, because it continues to happen that it's like one person speaking Greek and one person speaking French, and there is a word that means the same thing in both languages, but it means something completely different. Secondly, in this report, which we just got, I think late yesterday was when I saw it, so I haven't had time to talk about it separately. There are a number of things I know we have spoken often about not including outcomes on certain things because of the disruption in the year. So we don't have great data on academic outcomes, achievement outcomes. We don't have great data on closing the achievement gap. We don't have any data on discipline, of course, because when kids are not in school, we have a completely different context for that. There are things, though, I want to distinguish between outcomes and actions. Because while we may not have some of those outcomes, much of this we have taken actions on. And I think that's part of where we keep getting a little stuck. And I know Dr. Moore has said, and I don't disagree, that we don't want to get into who says what action was responsive to this need or not, and that's part of the challenge. And it is, again, as Dr. Moore and others keep saying, it's the job of the equity committee to do that. And as we are transitioning the equity committee, we need to be very specific that they are the ones who must review the information and decide whether the district has accomplished the goal, not the district itself. The district provides the information, but the equity committee evaluates the information. Some of these, however, have definitely happened. For example, in this, I'm scrolling through it, and I don't have it all noted. But for example, one of the things was, one of the requests of the 2019 Equity Committee, or the recommendations, develop an African American achievement plan that reflects measurable goals that mirrors the Pinellas County Bridge the Gap plan. We did that.
Exactly.
And we adapted it to our own. We did a really comprehensive plan. Does it mean we've accomplished all the outcomes in that plan? No. We didn't, and we are clear that as you mentioned, Mr. Barefoot, part of the goal here is not to say we've done everything. It's to acknowledge where we are in the process of it. For me, on some of the things like that, that's part of what's missing here for me. And again, we've gone back and forth about this a million times. That's part of what's missing for me. There are outcomes we can't get here, and I know that. And I don't want to do the back and forth. I think we have to be clear on our language first, because that's what gets us into trouble. But there are some things that we very straightforwardly have made progress. We have taken action. I don't want to say that we've achieved an outcome, but we have taken very clear action in response to this. And I'd like to be able, not in 97 binders and 5,000 pages, but to be able to simply say, yes, we did this.
Yep.
Or yes, we are somewhere in the process of this. I completely agree there's outcomes we can't measure right now. But there are certain actions we've taken responsive to this that I don't want to undersell either the work of the district or the needs of the NAACP and the Equity Committee. And I feel like we keep getting stuck on how to resolve that. So I'm interested to hear what maybe other board members take on that, on how we might resolve that. Because there's a lot of them here that we've made significant progress. Are we done? No. Have we achieved the outcomes that would call it closed? No. But have we made some progress? Yeah. And I'm not sure the best way to address that, because that keeps being a stumbling block.
Well, and I'll let other people, just two things. Number one, we agreed after the meeting that Dr. Moore would summarize what we had agreed to, which he did. And you all were copied on a summary. So if there was a disagreement as to what we agreed to as opposed to this misinterpretation or what have you, going forward, when there are these kinds of discussions, that somebody will summarize and circulate amongst those present, copying the various the executive committee of the NACP and our school board, this is what was agreed to. And I couldn't agree with you more. The word collaboration comes up a lot. And it is the word that you will hear. When we say collaboration, we think one thing. When they hear it, they think something else, and the assumption is we have agreement, and then 3 weeks later, it seems like we're back chasing our tails again. But I honestly believe, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, you've been at this a lot longer than I have, that you've heard this before, and we continue to. But I do think that this meeting last week, this conference call, solved some problems, and I think you're going to see not necessarily accomplishments, but where you are along the path and some of the academic achievement. Long after we're all gone, I hope that people are still working at it. You don't solve this achievement gap just because the DSEG order goes away after 53 years. And it goes far beyond black children. It's all children, and it's only made worse in this environment we've been in. So, Mrs. Berenborg, your turn.
Oh, thank you. I don't want to belabor the point, but I agree with you, Dr. Schiff. I think there have been some accomplishments, but I also think if you go back to the DSEG order and you look, basically it's equity committee's job to really analyze that. And I think, we're kind of, sometimes the NAACP and the board are getting into the weeds too much. And I think that we need to back off and do what the DSEG order says, which is that the equity committee is supposed to be evaluating this. And then our job is to write the report and to do what, we directed him to do. That's fine. But I also think that let's give our equity committee an opportunity once they reform, to really look at the progress that has been taken. And let's see if we can summarize that so that everybody agrees that that's the progress. I think that's part of the problem is with all these binders and everything, sometimes people don't agree that that is what's happening. So that's the part that I think that we need to focus on, is that the equity committee needs to be able to do their job.
Absolutely.
Mrs. Rosario?
What you're saying is not anything different than what I was just talking about with regard to adding some bullet points in there that are addressing some of the accomplishments that we have indeed begun.
Mhm.
In the areas, though, that are included in that form, rather than bringing up the 10 binders, or however many binders there were. So if the letters here, let me see if I can get it. If, for example, under Section 2, mentoring of new teachers and instructional staff, if there's anything that has been accomplished thus far to begin the work in this area, we should include that in here, which was what Mr. Barefoot mentioned at the very onset of the beginning of this conversation. I've mentioned it, Dr. Schiff, and of course, Mrs. Berenborg just mentioned it as well. It's all we're all speaking the same language, so we do need some indication of what has been accomplished or begun towards the work in these areas. And I think that might help. We do not have a committee right now. And right now, our focus is to get something to the courts, to agree on something to get to the courts, because we've got to get it done. We're going around in circles. Yes, we all agree what the work of the committee is supposed to be, but right now, we do not have a full functioning committee. So we've got to get this work or this narrative to the courts.
Mr. Barefoot,
Mrs.
Question.
Berenborg.
when is the next court date that we have to have something to the court?
Middle of March
Okay.
13th and 14th.
So the equity committee will have been formed and working on that, and that we'll be able to have some progress built by then, to be able to have a status report by then.
My recommendation would be their initial meeting is going to be in February, proposed now. At that meeting, once the chair is selected, I could provide an overview of the work that's being done this particular month. They could reconvene 2 or 3 weeks later. I can present them that work that was done. Then they could follow up with the joint meeting and provide a summary of that particular meeting. And that would move the work forward.
Dr. Jones?
Dr. Moore, I know you were just here in December of 2019, but did we ever respond to the December 27, 2019 information that went to the court? And at the end, a lot of non-compliance there. And if we have done compliance, obviously we should update it, but basically asking that best interests of African American students, teachers, and instructional staff, that the committee reports directly to the court. Where are we on that?
That was the recommendations of the 2019. A lot
Equity.
of equity committee.
Right.
2019 noncompliance. There was a great deal of disruption in December when the information sent to the joint report in December did not acquiesce or align to the information within that particular report in December. When I arrived in January, it was to create an African American Achievement Plan that wasn't even created. It was to create the systems and structures to address the initiatives within those particular plans.
Okay.
The responsibility of the Equity Committee is to provide that progress, their evaluation regarding, are you meeting the indicators within that section of the joint plan to attain unitary status? Each and every single one of those reports into November 18 says the district wasn't meeting progress. I can't speak to that. I wasn't here. That same report in presentation was not conducted this particular year. The creation of those 5 binders that we keep talking about was to present to the Equity Committee. Is it a significant matter? Absolutely. Did they look at specific things in terms of monitoring that over the year? Yeah, they looked at different things. But we don't have that to go forward.
Okay.
So it's having the opportunity to present the information and not do so in a way that is such a burden on the Equity Committee.
Okay.
Hence the doing it every 3 months.
Correct. And I know March of last year through December, obviously, we were dealing with COVID, but I'm just anxious to get this moving and get our Equity Committee going, and then see what progress we have made since 2019. So I think it's important, as we've all said before, to collaborate and move forward, because this is about our kids.
It's going to be really important on who the chair is. And we have 3 candidates, I believe, or 3 applications. And texting back and forth with Michonne Green yesterday, there are going to be more coming. I don't know how you sort through, because it's the decision of the 4
Right.
people. That's a heavy lift to put on 4 people, and I don't know whether it's an interview process or exactly how it works. Maybe somebody else does, but it's great to have, more applicants that are really interested in doing the work at something else. How do you choose? But I guess it'll move forward. Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, can I respond to that for a second? Because that really leads into our next 2 items. And I'm wondering if we can meld those a little bit. Because you just said that there are more applications coming for the chairperson position, but as I understand it, technically the date for that has closed, as has the date for equity member applications. Given that we've delayed these meetings that we thought were going to happen and these decisions this week, wouldn't it be prudent then to extend those dates and invite more applications for both sets of positions? Like you just said, if there are other people who you have heard may be interested but who have not submitted applications, I suspect that that's not true simply for the chairperson position, but perhaps also for the members' positions.
Yeah, I don't know that the member position was communicated through the collaborator, the in-house intranet. And again, back and forth with Rashawn, she felt that it wasn't well as publicized as it could have been. I don't know. I'm just, repeating. But she did say, I guess as she transitions to Orlando, is trying to be helpful here, felt that there were some people who were interested in applying. And my response, actually, I didn't think about dates per se. Well, we've got a couple of weeks now because we've pushed everything out. Maybe we ought to.
Then we have to officially reopen applications. Technically, we've closed them. If we're going to invite additional applications for either position, sets of positions, we have to reopen those.
Well-
And we have to publicize that we're reopening them.
Then do we have to, is that something we have to vote on tonight? Or is that, we just,
The two scenarios. First is the equity committee for the two representatives who are employees of the district. I see absolutely no reason to extend that timeline. That information is out there. You have two very viable, qualified candidates. It's been appropriately advertised for the school system. And as you said, I'd rather those individuals have all of the information, as well as Mr. Brown, if they're taking on a new member as well. They can begin that review process. They can begin to do all this above and beyond work. So in terms of the chairperson, now that we have the time, I believe this is an opportunity to be in service of the community. There are parameters set on the employee. You have to be an employee. We appropriately posted that. We have that information. We could have the 4 members on both sides in place doing that research, casting a wider net or redistributing that information again to serve as the chair. I don't see any reasons not to do that, because the reality is we don't appoint that particular person. The committee appoints that particular person. My recommendation would be to re-advertise the position for the chair to see if additional names come into consideration. I did provide information of the 3 applications that we did receive. That's information for you. It's been shared with the president of the NAACP as well. So casting a wider net and extending the time, I see no issues with that. Ultimately, that selection would happen once we verify the particular date in February now. But I think it would be prudent of us to go ahead and select from the 2 individuals who have requested the opportunity to be in service of this board.
But those two you're talking specifically about just board-selected committee members, not the chairperson.
Correct. And the requirement for that is you must be an employee of the district. You have 2 very, very qualified individuals who have put their name in the hat. One is Ataba Patterson and one is Keandra Foster, both up-and-comers in our school system, working very, very, very hard and have backgrounds around the work associated with equity. As you know, LaVon Walker served in this capacity last year. In my meeting with her, she's excited about the opportunity of extending her service to you and our community as a member for the upcoming school year. So our action tonight would be to appoint Keandra for a second year, and then to make a... Levon Walker, sorry, Levon, for a second year, and then so call for a nomination of the two individuals, have a second, and then a vote to adopt the new member. And then what I would do is meet with the two of them, present them with the information, give them an overview of the joint plan. There's a great deal of information to upload them to prepare that they're making informed decisions. So when they sit at that first equity meeting, they're fully prepared to represent you as the board and their community, because I'm going to be honest, in this joint plan, the burden placed on two employees to select the chair, that's a big responsibility. That is humongous responsibility that the joint plan places on those two individuals, and the only qualification for them is, from the joint plan, is to be an employee. So it is a monumental task that the three individuals, the one currently serving, willing to serve again, and the two putting themselves up for service are willing to take on. So we just, personally, I thank each and every single one of them for that opportunity to serve.
All right. Good discussion. Have we transitioned into the next one, which is the
We're in all three.
equity member? You just did. And tonight, you will present the applicants. We all have copies of their applications, and we know what the deal is with the equity chair. I think to your point, the sooner that, and I know the executive committee of the NAACP has selected their two members, one's returning and one's new, much like ours. I think that continuity is important. Otherwise, you're going to start over, and both the NAACP and the district representatives, once selected, can start to vet the various candidates to be the chair. I guess you got to pick a specific date if you're going to reissue the advertisement. And would you say the 16th is when the equity committee meets? You've got to give them at least, pick it arbitrarily, pick a date, probably a minimum of probably 10
Yep.
days before that.
So what am I recommend? Typically, what we'd follow is the Friday preceding, so at least a week's time to post the advertisement. So if we extended it today, it would be advertised for about a week, and then it would close around the 10th or 11th, and then that information would go to the individuals, the chairs who've submitted their information. I would send to the board, I would send to the NAACP president, as well as the 4 equity members, so they can begin their review process.
Is it possible, do you want to set this, do all the candidates have to be sent at once? Or as they come in, can you send them along so that all of a sudden those 4 people don't have to, digest 6, 7, 8, hopefully there's that many people interested. Whatever makes the most sense. I don't know what any restrictions are.
And that's fine. That's Nancy can do that as she receives them, because they're going to the board secretary, and as she did last Friday, she sent it to Mr. Brown, and she sent it to all of you. So that's an easy process to implement, and respects everyone's time as best we can.
All right, Dr. Schiff.
Just a quick, I just want to hear from the board as well, their thoughts about opening the membership or search for the equity committee within the district. Because while that wasn't advertised within the district, I would just like to hear what fellow board members think about continuing, about making sure we have the broadest base possible of candidates.
Mrs. Barrenborn.
Yeah, my concern is that the first equity meeting is on the 16th. And so if we, continue to push things back as we have all along with all of this, I think that's not fair to whoever we choose, that they won't be able to digest all the information that they need to digest in order to be prepared for that first meeting, to make that monumentous task of deciding who's going to lead that team. So I think to be fair to the individual, how long has it been advertised for, Dr. Moore?
The information, the initial email, wait a minute, let me just turn my page. It was emailed, hold on. It's here. I know it is. It was advertised through the 11th, and then it was been on our webpage.
So I guess my question is, how many days was it up and advertised, and how was it advertised?
We're talking about the board chair now.
The board chair is.
No, we're talking about
Membership.
membership to beyond our choice,
Just the membership
just from
application.
people
Oh,
that
so
work for us.
that was up for 11 days, so it was.
11 days, okay, just like any other posting would be. Okay, to me, that's fair. To me, I just want to be fair to whoever we choose, because if we open this up and continue it, then we're going to put them in a situation where they're going to have to bust their butt all weekend long to read all this, kind of like the old days with being on the board, reading everything
Although
in
those,
just 4 days.
just in fairness, some of those days were over break. Right, so it was like a week when we were back, right? And what dates did those happen?
But we're differentiating between candidates that would represent the school district
Correct.
and
That's the only vote we
candidates
have.
to be the chair.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the chair right now. I'm just asking for
right.
clarity on the membership, the
membership.
members right now.
I thought
We've
that-
already agreed that we were going to extend the dates for the chair position.
I thought the candidates for our positions was closed.
It was, but if we're,
It is.
Yeah.
She's bringing up that she wants to open it back up.
Oh.
I do
well,
not think it should
I
open
thought you were
again.
talking about the chair. I don't think they should be open either, but that's.
11 days is
Let me
plenty.
make sure. It was on the website on the
Mrs. Rosario?
13th.
of December?
No, of January. And
How
I'm
can
looking
that
for the collaborator.
Be if it closed on the 11th.
Excuse me?
You said it closed on the 11th.
I think he was talking
No.
about the chair,
I was talking about
Oh,
the chair.
got it, okay.
and I'm looking now for the, and the collaborator.
And it was put on the website from the 13th until when was the closing?
Do you know when you took it?
Probably have that date here somewhere.
It's still up there?
The 19th is when we got the two, and then I think it closed a day or two after that.
The dates, just
Saying it was on
the dates on the application. Ms. Foster is dated January 7th, and Ms. Patterson is dated January 14th, and the application that they both filled out
I didn't take it.
designated Monday, January 18th is the deadline, a week ago yesterday.
I'm blocked out. It's crazy.
Right, I don't need to hold up the whole meeting right now on this, but if you could let me know those dates, that'd be helpful.
Yes, for some reason I'm blocked out.
Ms. Rosario?
So let's just, hold on, I'm sorry. Because this is, sorry. It was posted on the 7th, the deadline was the 18th. It was up for 11 days, as I said, which gives them 11 days, weekends included. You know, my recommendation is that we move forward with this. We have to have people in place to do this work.
Right.
And we cannot be the ones who are stalling this work.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is one of the reasons, one of the perfect examples of us
always wanting to do the right thing, but constantly finding ourselves in this hamster wheel in order for us to move forward and get the work done. I just think we need to move forward. Dr. Moore, I do have a question with regard to the position that was posted for the selected member of the board of the committee. Was that the position that was also posted in the newspaper?
No, it was not, but the joint plan clearly states our member must be an employee.
Okay.
So we use the employee communication system, where the
reach out.
chair is a member at large.
Did we also post that on our Facebook page? I thought I saw something on our Facebook page for the member position.
No.
I don't believe so, but it was on the website until the 22nd was the deadline.
Okay. Did we have was it the same amount of time also that we posted for the board, for the committee chairperson position as well? Was that the same, are we talking about the same dates?
No, I don't quote me on there. Let me go backwards. Facebook, external facing in terms of communicating to the community, not necessarily appropriate for district-wide communication. Why I'm in favor of continuing to post the
Chairperson.
the chairperson is we were working with NAACP in collaboration, letting them know, even though it's clearly defined in the joint plan, the responsibility of the school system, the school board to create the committee, we were looking for consensus so that wasn't up as long. So therefore, having this additional
Okay.
time would behoove us to put it up and get additional applicants if we could.
So the membership was posted longer than the chair position?
Correct.
Would have been posted? Okay, just wanted to clarify that. And then I have a question for the characteristics. Well, something that we did, I believe it was last year, that I requested to be added to an application, and I believe it was one for the committee members. I'm not sure exactly which, if it was for the member or for the possible chair position, but the question of why, I would love to know, and I'm wondering if the committee members would like to know why a particular person would want to be the chair of our equity committee. I do realize, I do understand that we have some people who have submitted, 3 people who may have submitted letters of interest, not an application, letters of interest to be the chairperson. So I think at this point, as I'm thinking out loud, it would be kind of unfair that we wouldn't have included that question in their, in request of their letter of interest. But I certainly would have wanted that question in hindsight moving forward next year. Maybe we can remember to put that in. Why do you want to be a member of the equity committee? Why do you want to be a board chairperson of the equity committee? I think those are important, that pieces of a person's interest that we don't get from all the other questions that we've asked. So I'm just throwing that out there. If we are going to extend the interest, should we add that as a question? Because as Mr. Barefoot mentioned, when the committee meets, it's a very difficult task to choose a person to be the chairperson, whereas if they understand why a particular person has that. And I don't think that it would be difficult of us to reach out to the 3 that have already submitted and ask them, would you mind just also submitting and attaching a why? Why would you like to be a part? I think that's very, very important. What do you all think about that?
I think that is the challenge. I mean, I can't imagine, whatever the number is, in this back and forth with Rashawn, she indicated she thought there were 10 applicants for the chair. You all would know the last time around.
3.
The last time.
The last time.
3. There have only been
The
3
last time
letters
for
of
the
interest.
2019 committee he's
Yeah.
talking about, not the
Oh,
2021.
Yeah, there were 10, and she was somewhat surprised, and she didn't think that people were aware of it. You know, we could go on and on, but at any rate, I think what you suggest, any time that you can provide the committee members, our 2 reps in the NACP's reps, the more information about the candidates and why, short of an interview, I think makes sense.
So can we please add that to the reposting? And can we reach out to the 3 who have already submitted and ask them to submit a follow-up as to that question? So that then when they resubmit it to you, you can just attach it? Yeah, because they didn't get to answer that one question then.
Can you go back and
Awesome.
change that?
Thank
Already
you.
applied?
So the response that they gave is to capture, I would say they're all submitting a letter of interest, which would capture why they would be interested. Is it explicit in saying the word why? But if you were to norm on the process, and everything we do here is extremely critical, my recommendation, as Ms. Rosario was initially saying, is to review that in the future moving forward, but review the letters of interest, the information received that the individuals are submitting.
Can I?
No, I don't think that's clear.
I've just looked at all 3 of them, and all 3 of them make a statement about why they believe they are
Okay.
qualified for
they
this
did.
position and what their interest is.
Go back.
They do.
To me, I think the best way to resolve this is to invite them to submit that comment if they want to, but not to require it. They can submit it if they want. They don't have to if they don't want to. All 3 of them, I've just reread their applications, and all 3 of them make a comment about why they are interested and believe that they would be a good chairperson.
Let's go ahead.
I have reviewed those too, and I think that they answer that question when you look at their letters of interest.
Mrs. Barrenborg, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I agree. That's why I was confused as to why we needed to go back and ask them again, because I think anytime you look at a letter of interest, somebody's going to try to prove to you why they want to do what they're doing. I don't think we need to, because we didn't ask them to fill out a questionnaire, we just said a letter of interest. So in a letter of interest, then they can put whatever they want in there. But a questionnaire, when they fill it out, that's when you ask, okay, if you had the specific question, I see what Ms. Rosario is saying. If we had a specific question saying, please explain why you want to do this, then we have that very black and white. But I think if you go back and look at their letters, you'll see they're going to try to sell why they're doing this or why they want to do this.
We should be thankful that
I
they
know.
want to do it. I
Yes.
mean, this is it's a ton of work, and you could say it's a huge responsibility
To be
and a great
honest,
opportunity at the same time to really make a difference. After 53 years, provide some leadership. I think it's wonderful that anybody wants to do it.
and frankly, even though it's a volunteer position, if you are not in your opening statement stating why you're interested and what your qualifications are, then it's not the job for you,
Right,
to be honest.
agree.
I mean, that's what anybody would look for in a cover letter, I would presume. And if we're reopening it, we can say we're reopening it, we can say that we are keeping their applications, we can invite them to resubmit if they would like to add additional information, but I don't know that it's mandatory.
The why wouldn't be for us, the why would be for the committee, though. So we
Well,
would
that's up
want,
to them on an
we would want
interview,
someone,
too.
common sense, to include their why, but not
Well, if
everybody
they
does.
don't, I mean, I can't speak for the committee, I'm not on it, but if somebody doesn't tell me why they want this very labor-intensive and highly visible job, if they don't tell me why they want it and why they're qualified, they're not my candidate. But
I
that's
agree with you.
that's just my opinion.
I think we repost as is, provide the information to the equity committee as that information becomes available. They are charged with the responsibility of having this exact same conversation you all are having to select who would be the best representative to serve as the chair. So the information those individuals provide, in that letter of interest, as board members were saying, you make your case. And if you have to ask very, very specific questions regarding to get the information out of them, they may not be the right representative to serve in that capacity.
Can I ask just a procedural question? If we have 2 representatives, and the NACP has 2, is there anything to prevent our 2 representatives from discussing candidates as they come in with each other, or is this a sunshine law issue?
This is a sunshine, so part of that
So
initial.
they've got to do it in isolation.
Yes, yeah, so it'd be initial review, very similar to what you all do. These are
Okay.
things that I may look at. They'll share their information or their research as they come to that table during that initial meeting.
We probably ought to make sure, at least with our folks, that they realize that
No,
they're on
we-
their own leading up to that meeting.
We will, and I think it's a standard practice in previous
Okay.
years. Suzanne has conducted that training both individually and within the Sunshine.
I have some experience with the sunshine laws. They can be, the simplest things can be made, for someone who wants to make an issue out of it, big issues.
We don't have any experience with those, though, so thanks for,
I
I'm
do.
teasing. No,
Have
that's my point. We've been here for, yeah.
But
They-
all
they
you,
have
all
per-
you need to do is not realize what you're doing, and all of a sudden, if somebody has an agenda,
Yep,
they can turn something that's very innocent into
yep.
nothing more than a pain in the butt. At any rate, I digress. All right. Good
have-
discussion.
Thank you.
Next agenda item.
Our final agenda item is a final review of the policy that allows us to go out for public hearing to create our foundation. So based on feedback and additional legal review, I asked Mr. Fagan to work with council to look at the proposed policy. I want time to fully vet, research, brand, and bring name recommendations to the committee that have been fully vetted. So were we able to create a policy that wasn't name-specific, therefore not rushing that process? And the answer to that question is yes. So this affords me the opportunity to do that research and that branding to bring you a name that doesn't compete with other organizations, while at the same time holding true to the initial conversation that we had. Also, there was a little bit of cleanup within the policy. So the policy that I sent to you this morning highlights those changes, which has been reviewed for legal sufficiency, and this is the policy that will be before you this evening. If there's any questions or concerns, we'd be happy to address.
Anybody? Mrs. Barrenborg?
Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you for making it very easy to understand, very straightforward, so that we can approve it quickly, we can get people in place. I think it's important that the name isn't just jumped on really quickly, that we really think about this, and that the committee gets an opportunity to really think about, vet it. Because I think when you do that very quickly, sometimes you step on toes. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mrs. Rosario?
Thank you. I have a typo in A, I saw, where it reads, "The Board of Directors of shall be approved." We just need to remove that "of." So it would read, "The Board of
No, it's-
Oh,
Directors."
it's the foundation.
Foundation.
They're removing "of the foundation."
No, they're
Just
not.
the first letter. They've capitalized
It was
T and
caps, and now
F and
it's not.
removed the lowercase t and f.
Okay. So it's going to read, "The Board of Directors of the foundation shall be approved." Is that right? Okay,
Right.
got it. And then I would like to add somewhere in here that the work of the fund or the work of, the foundation, the work of the foundation must support and align with the strategic plan of the district. And we don't have that here. You and I talked about this. You agreed that that's something that's very important to the work of the of the foundation. So what you had recommended to me in a previous meeting was the fund or the foundation or the work of the foundation must support and align with the district strategic plan or other key initiatives as approved by the board.
And what letter are you reading from?
It's not here. That's why you told me you were going to add it, but you didn't add it. So it would be an additional F.
Specifically,
add-
can you repeat that again?
The foundation or the work of the foundation must support and align with the district strategic plan or other key initiatives as approved by the board.
If I can make a suggestion, I think that should be part of the mission,
Right.
not part of the policy. The policy, you want it to be as simple and as straightforward as possible. When you start defining the mission of a foundation, you can then tie it into whatever your goals and objectives are. That's where the emphasis that you want to place on the strategic plan ought to be, in my opinion.
And just an additional insight, as we discuss, and I circle back for legal review, feedback I received from staff, one of his strategic plan is no longer the way of work, as Mr. Barefoot was saying, a very specific board policy that doesn't have to continuously be reevaluated. So
I'm sorry, say that again?
creating a policy that's specific to a moment of time may not be the best way of creating policy. So if there is no strategic plan, being specific to a strategic plan, even though I don't perceive any system not having a strategic plan in coming years, maybe being specific to a strategic plan. Maybe they don't have strategic plans. Maybe they have action plans. Maybe they have organizational maps or whatever the
So
case
then
would
it
be.
should say the district's vision and goals, or vision, mission. The foundation should not work independently of the goals and the vision of the district.
Right, and those.
So that should be in here. This is the policy that we're writing for that.
And I would
of which
defer
we-
to, when it comes to policy, I'm going to always defer to legal.
Okay, so let's ask. What are your
I think
suggestions?
you already did ask, didn't you?
I did, and that's the recommend, but go ahead. Mike.
Suggestion was to keep it more general, as stated. I can give you more information on that.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I honestly need to go back and reread what the opinion was, but that is my understanding, is not to reference any particular plan or goal, or just to keep it so that it's always current.
So the goal and the mission of the district's plan, of the foundation, should not work independent of anything else that the district, that the board, vision, mission of the board in any way. The district foundation should support the goals and the vision and the mission of the district. That, to me, is so critical.
I agree, and I think when
we
we,
move forward to create something that does not, we have never had a conversation in this room that suggested that we would ever not have a strategic plan.
no, and nor will we ever, but I'm saying that was the feedback that I received from, looking at the policy. Why would you create something that may down the road that supersedes any of us? Vision, mission would be something that would be, similar in thought. So it's creating that. I think as we create the foundation and they create a vision and a mission, it is in fact aligned to the districts, whether it be the guiding principles or what was approved. You as a district or as a board will approve the budget, the priorities, and what will and will not be funded. So I think in some ways, although this is the authority to create the policy, and as it incorporates and it is in fact created, you see the governance of that, which gives the board a level of comfort that it is fully aligned to the priorities of the system as a whole, because they're intertwined in terms of expectations, priority, vision, and mission.
I think, Mrs. Berenborg,
Yeah, I just think that, I think we're getting in the weeds again. I think what we need to do is just rely on legal, because they know more than we do about what we should do for policy. And I think Mrs. Rosario is bringing up a good point. It does need to be aligned to the strategic plan. So I think that when they form and create their vision and mission, I'm sure that you will be there or someone will be there to let them know that that's extremely important for the work that they're going to do. Thank you.
Mr. Fagan?
To the chair. For me, from my side, looking at item C, the school board shall oversee all activities. That means anything involving the foundation, the board will know everything before it gets executed. D, all expenditures shall be for the benefit of the programs of the school district of Indian River County. Once again, any expenditure reported will have the full backing of the board. Nothing will be done aligned with everything the district wants to get done.
Yeah, this foundation is, if you roll up the financials, the foundation will be part of the consolidated, it'll have a separate P&L, income statement, all like that, but it will be, on a consolidated basis, will be part of the financial statements of the district. So from every legal and accounting perspective, it falls within, and I, you know, I've been involved in foundations and fundraising for many, many years, and you really, the key, and that's where this branding marketing comes into play, is defining the mission so that the community knows exactly. Mission and vision are fine for organizations. For a foundation, the mission or the vision, whatever you want to call it, is really the critic besides the name, the critical key marketing. That's where you put a statement out of the community, what this foundation is all about and what it hopes to accomplish. Dr. Jones?
Very, very excited about this, and I know we don't know, or maybe we do know how many board members there will be, but I just want to reiterate that it, you know, reflects the diversity of our community.
Absolutely.
And very, very excited for this for our students and community. Thank you.
You know, and I know the one thing that I was concerned about, and I think I mentioned this before, conversations with Doug Herron, who's the director of the Educational Foundation. And I guess the way I've come to explain the difference is that foundation is more programmatic focused, and this is going to be more project focused. My words, not necessarily incorporated here. And I think when you think about the track, turfing the fields that are on the Graves fields, I'm sure we could all come up with 2 or 3 things that are project related that could keep this foundation busy for the next 5 years, adding value to the community, to the benefit of the kids, as well as the total community. So I think this is a major step forward. The challenge is how we come out of the gate. And that needs to be thoughtful and representation across the community, board members that have some experience as well as are able to mobilize the communities they represent to get behind whatever the projects of the day are. And I think we will find, I mean, the timeline that my thinking, talking with Dr. Moore about this and individual that we've met with, is that's the work between now and the fall. And when we get to the fall, when the school year opens, we could kick this thing off in some form or fashion. It'll be clear to the community exactly what the foundation has been created for, and maybe the first project, if it turns out to be, you know, raising money to build a track. I guess unless there's no other comments, anything else?
That concludes the items. Thank you.
Anybody? I don't want to keep anybody here longer. Anything else? Otherwise, we are convened until 6 o'clock. Thank you, everybody.
Hit your gavel.